As people on the internet, we are visible in a way most humans throughout history could never have imagined. But while we might entertain or educate or inspire or build community with our visible presence, are we ever really seen? Welcome to Skeptic Haven. Let's get ready to unload.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh**. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh**. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take sh**. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
Hey, keep playing that intro music, please.
I know, that's
that's
great.
That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Everyone.
yes, welcome.
Hey.
Hello. So, to set the stage a little bit, in school, I was very well known. I was in all the extracurriculars from theater to science Olympiad to sports. I was very visible too. I was the kid anybody could talk to without judgment, without ratting them out. In a school with no counselors, literally everyone talked to me at some point. But when someone wasn't seeking an ear that would really listen, more often than not, I sat alone with a book. I was well known, but almost nobody knew me at all. Today we're discussing being visible and being seen, connection versus disconnection. But first, all of you fine folks watching now or in the future need to know that Skeptic Haven is monetized. And that means you can send super chats to pose your questions with priority, as well as join memberships and do all the other YouTube things. You know the things, like, share, send super thanks after the fact, and if this is your first time here, don't forget to subscribe. We'd love to see you back for our other amazing shows coming up. So hello everyone, thank you for joining us. I am Ember, of course, and today I am also joined by Mary and debuting for the first time on Skeptic Haven, Patty and Nancy, the Apostate Sisters. Would you care to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Patty, did you want, well, okay, I can give a little background about who we are. So, the Apostate Sisters, we've had our channel for what, a little over a year now, Pets, I think a year and a half almost. We are actually sisters, by the way. We're not twins. Actually, Patty's a couple years older than me. But we came up with the concept of recording ourselves when we started to have these conversations. You know, we both live in separate states, and we realized that our conversations kept going back to this doomsday cult that we were raised in. It is called the Worldwide Church of God. It was run under one Herbert W. Armstrong, who is dead now. But
Yay.
Yes, yay. Yeah, horrible person. He was quite the con man. If we had to describe what Worldwide Church of God was, it's very similar to like Seventh-day Adventists or JWs we often get compared to. And it was very legalistic, very Leviticus-based, Old Testament. No pork or shellfish, no birthdays, no celebrating Christmas, things like that. There were a number of different things that set us apart from a lot of like mainstream churches. But the church split apart and now exists in the form of a number of different splinter churches. And so Patty and I thought we would discuss what it's like being a survivor of the Worldwide Church of God and be sort of an advocate for all the people and survivors that we know are still out there. And so that is why we started our channel. Patty, I don't know if you want to take it from there and talk about what specifically our channel also entails.
Yeah, I mean, I think we started with a few vague ideas, including that one of, hey, we had this interesting cult experience and we want to share that because clearly those folks are going to be coming out of those places, those high control environments, and need a place to land. And we want to be here in the skeptic community providing that and making sure that the people here know what the conditioning was like in a cult like ours, you know, so that we can provide the space that is needed. I think the secondary function of what Nancy and I are doing that we've kind of come to realize throughout the people we've engaged with is that there is so much religious trauma, and a lot of it having to do with purity culture and autonomy and getting to know what it is you want out of life and to be who you are. And so that's the next thing that we've been building into our platform, is trying to create spaces for that, for people to have a place where they feel safe enough to share what they went through and to like have recognition of, oh, these are directly the impacts of our religious upbringing, and to be able to come together for that come together over that, right? So we've got the content on the channel. We're looking at doing discussion groups through our channel memberships, and then I'm opening up some coaching for one-on-one spaces as well to kind of address that need.
So people can be heard and seen, which is what we're
Yes, exactly.
That's what we're here for.
Or even feel valid enough to be heard and seen, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to point out something very important. Being visible matters, and your representation matters. The visibility portion absolutely matters. And I would say this because I've been calling myself an activist for a while. But when you have a lack of adequate representation of the group that you come from, it's often dominated by narratives that disproportionately benefit the most privileged people within the group. The people who have the most power, the most prestige, or the most affluent, they're the ones who benefit from maintaining that narrative. And sometimes it's really incredibly powerful to just disrupt that. But when you disrupt that,
A little fuzzy, honey.
an
Yep,
environment.
Your audio kind of dipped out for a second there.
Sorry, is that better?
That's good.
Yep, you're good now.
Okay. When you, I don't even remember what I had said, but when you create, my thought where I was going with it was when you create things and you create spaces where people can feel visible, where people can feel like they are allowed to have life experiences that don't align with the popular narrative about their specific group of people.
Yeah.
What you're doing is creating connection with people. And it's not just people being visible anymore. It's people feeling seen and heard.
Yes. Like going your whole life not believing in a specific deity and thinking there was something wrong with you. Then you grow up, start finding yourself, your own voice, and then you realize, oh, there's all these other people that feel the same way. Maybe I'm not such a weirdo.
That's one of the key elements of visibility, is not only for yourself, but for other people. One of the reasons that I started being publicly atheist and then later being publicly trans is so other people who feel like they are alone can look and see there are other people like me. I'm not a crazy person. This is a real thing that real people actually do. And it would have helped me greatly to see other people like me much earlier on, of both categories. So I
didn't even know that people like me existed when I was a child.
Yes.
Right? Oh my gosh.
For sure. So I guess that brings us to our first framing device, which is, what does being visible mean to each of you? Mary, since you were just going, why don't you start us off?
Really? What does being visible mean to me? It just means that, I don't know. Where do you start? Should I start when the church threw me under the bus with the ministry? Or when they sent 4 busloads of Amish people to the courtroom? Where do I start? Because that made me visible in a way I didn't ask to be made visible.
Non-consensual visibility. That's
because I was in a
take on it.
courtroom reading my victim impact statement in front of 4 busloads of Amish people. I was visible, all right. I was streamed on the live and local news. It went on 2020 and Good Morning America. But I digress. What does it mean to you?
That kind of visibility sounds terrifying.
It's like,
Yeah,
I was
that's
20 years old. It was terrifying. And people got up and told me, and I was subjected to listening to people wax and wane poetic about what good Amish men these perpetrators of crimes were, crimes against children.
And
So
that
my
raises
point
a
is,
We've
what
heard,
does being visible mean to me? Well, for me, it was traumatic as fuck.
yeah.
very understandable, and that kind of raises the distinction between being visible and being seen, having connection or being disconnected. You were put on a national stage, but people didn't really understand you. It was the event, it was the circumstances surrounding you, and you were just the face
Could
in
have
that
been
situation.
anybody else.
Spectacle. Like you,
Could
it
have
sounds like you were made a spectacle.
I was
Yes.
made a spectacle, but quite frankly, up until like June, well, in the history of Amish activism, like one of the things that people have said about me, and I don't even know if this is really true, but they said like I was the first person who like left the church and then reported the abuse, and they were successfully prosecuted. I don't know how true that is. I don't even know if I want to believe that, but I think that's part of why it was such a spectacle. And the other part is there were 5 people in my immediate family arrested and prosecuted, and they pled guilty for the crimes they committed against children. And so the point is I was made something. People were utterly fascinated. I was just an object for them to satisfy their curiosity because they wanted their trauma porn. And I was 20 years old trying to navigate that. And then people started telling me all this stuff like, oh, but that's your mom who was arrested and prosecuted for failure to aid a victim and report a crime. But sure, that's my mom.
It's just your mom, so that's okay? Is that what they're implying?
Oh, but the Amish taught you how to cook and clean and bake and sew and garden and all this other glorious, wonderful shit.
Oh no!
Yeah,
Oh,
like
skills for the
aren't you
real world.
grateful for all the positives that you
so,
get from the experience?
So grateful. So my point is, I was visible, and I was visible in a way I didn't want to be visible. And in fact, at one point in time, I literally took myself off the visibility circuit and said, F you. I'm tired of hearing people's perspectives and opinions about my life. It does not negate the reality of what I survived, despite the way they tried to expire me.
Right.
Yeah, and you've gone a long way towards reclaiming your ownership of your own story and bridging that gap between being visible and being seen, because you've written books. And one of your books, the poetry book, is one of the inspirations for why we're doing this show today, because it has connected with so many people
you
and
mean
resonated.
this one?
Yes. So
Okay.
I see it.
yeah,
Okay.
why don't you give a quick introduction for people
Okay.
who, because there
Let's
are
do
a
it.
lot of
Cool.
people
Yeah,
who have never even seen Skeptic Haven's programming before watching right now.
Yay.
Yeah.
I just want to point out, so this book, can y'all see anything wrong with this pose? Anybody?
I mean, wrong, it depends on who you're asking, I suppose. That's a very obedient pose, which, you know, some people look at that as a good thing. We know what type of people those are.
Okay. That's
Yes.
great observation. I'm going to tell y'all what's going on with this book cover. Because in chapter 5 of this book, I wrote about being on my knees in front of the church and confessing my sins. This is the pose. Now, my hair is not done properly here. The covering itself has too wide of a thing right here. The folds in the back of the covering are wrong for the community that I was. The way the covering is pleated in the back goes 2 ways. We were not allowed to have 2-way pleated coverings because that was too worldly and unholy.
No going both ways.
The fact that one covering string is in the back and the other one's in the front, clearly it's not tied. And even over here, you can't really see it well, but the pins that I used to close this dress are wrong. We were not allowed to have these poofy sleeves. We were not allowed to have the actual there's the stuff, I can't think of the English word for it, but there's the stuff in the apron string that is extra stiff. I forget what it's called. Oh my God, whatever. But we weren't allowed to have that, and it's in that apron string. Like every single piece of this is saying "F you."
Meaning, Mary, you were really shitty at being obedient. Yeah? That's what I'm getting at.
One might say that. One might say that.
Yeah, I do love that, though, the way it's
Wow.
deliberately designed
Ooh.
specifically to be disobedient.
Yes, in
Remember the
every
back.
little way.
Look, my stepfather, in a newspaper article on April 10, 2004, is quoted as telling a reporter, well, she's just so disobedient. And if it happened that many times, she must have been asking for it.
Oh.
So, I mean, you want to call me disobedient like it's a bad thing. Well, here, let me show you what you can do with your arbitrary rules about making Amish women's dresses. And that hat, never. Amish women are not allowed to wear hats.
Oh.
Just the little bonnets, huh?
Mm,
Or is that what you call them?
do we want to talk about head coverings? Because you see them and you think bonnet, right? Okay.
Yeah.
It's a word that comes to mind, but to me, having not seen
I'll be
Amish
right
people
back.
until later on,
Yeah. Let's see
It-
them.
Oh.
yeah, it
Okay.
reminds me more than anything of the head coverings in Handmaid's Tale, even though those
Oh,
were more of like the
absolutely,
flat
yeah.
pancake type.
Mm-hmm. But is there a different term for it then? It looks like a bonnet, but there's got to be a different name for it. right?
Okay. Well, first off, you're about to get an education. Thank you for entertaining me. Okay.
And this
This is one.
Okay.
That is not a bonnet. That is called a cop. We would translate it to English in head covering. This is the one, it's too wide right here.
Okay.
And these folds, like right here, you see how there's like lines going up and down and then across? We were
Mhm.
not allowed to have those going across.
Wow.
And even these, the covering strings are the wrong kind of material for the settlement that I grew up in.
Wow.
so they control everything to that level of detail.
Yes. Second off,
Wait, does that mean Amish follow the don't mix fabrics bit in Leviticus?
well, it depends. I digress.
Okay.
This is called a kopdu. And it
Okay.
goes like this.
Mhm.
Oh, look at that. And you tie it under your chin. And
How's
certain
that feel?
types of Anabaptist groups, they're
Yeah.
not allowed to, like they put it over their head and then they go like this. And then, and this is specific to the Holdeman Mennonites, they have to tuck their tails in because it draws too much attention to the chest and, makes me lust after people. Another way to wear this one specifically is like this
Okay.
and tie it in the back.
Could it have been in that color, or did it have to be all black?
In some of the settlements we lived in, we were allowed to have this color. In all of the settlements, we were allowed to have navy blue and black. But in other settlements, we were not allowed to have this color.
Okay. Okay.
Too
Progressive
colorful.
blue.
Okay. So those are head coverings, right?
You'd be kicked out immediately, Ember.
We have a cop, we have a kopdu, and then we have
Okay.
different types of ways to wear the kopdu. And then there's even a third kopdu. I don't know. Oh, it's right here.
Oh, this
This
is
one-
fascinating. Thank you for sharing.
This is another kopdu, but it's by a specific type of Amish. We would have never been allowed to wear this color or this type
Like
of kopdu.
panties. Dude.
Okay. Yeah.
And it just snaps in the back because it has a snap on the back. Okay.
Oh, a snap. That's
Uh-huh.
very progressive of that group, then, huh?
Mhm.
Right.
Oh, I know. They don't
Yeah,
have to
long.
tie it anymore, right? And then to top it all off, so you go from point A. Let's put a traditional bonnet on. What you have to do before you even put a bonnet on. So you put in the summertime, you would probably put this on, and you're supposed to have like 2 finger width of hair displaying because that's all we were supposed to have displaying. They're not supposed to comb your hair too straight back and not have it hanging down too low because we have to govern every part of it.
Mhm.
And then
Like men see a strand of hair and they're going to get a boner, and you just
I'm
take
sure that's the problem. And then this would have been a summer bonnet from where I grew up in. And then we had a different type of bonnet that was, we called it an Iwakop. And if you notice it, it looks different. It has like these. This is a winter bonnet.
Wow.
And in the
How does
winter
it
time,
feel?
huh?
How does it feel to you when you put it on now? Do you have
Oh,
like
it's
a
hilarious.
Okay, it's just hilarious for you, or is there any like triggery feelings or anything?
I have literally done the work.
Hey, that's
And when
good.
I say
Hell yeah.
that,
Hell yeah.
part of what I have done with my life is I have taken that visibility and said, you know what? You want to talk about me? Let me give you something to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
I
There,
love
if you're not familiar with some of Mary's work, there's videos, and some of them are deliberately provocative in ways that will definitely make you think. While we're on that subject,
Good.
before I forget for later, where can people find your stuff, Mary?
Oh, I'm on. Well, there's a misfitamish.com. There is Amazon where you can buy my books, or you can buy signed copies of my books on my TikTok shop.
Great.
And, you know, I will also say this. I love performative art.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't understand performative art, you might have issue with some of the things I do.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm excited. Okay, this is
Look at
good. This is
Writing
good.
it down right now.
Yeah. Oh, PC's already got it. Pragmatic. You
Oh.
you are the
Crystal,
boss of
you got
links.
it.
Darling.
PC's the best.
God.
Oh, good.
But I think to me, the thing is sometimes you are cast into certain situations, regardless of what you want. And I will say this too, one more thing. It's not because the reporter outed me. That's not. The reporter did not even name me. But even I was walking down the street in Viroqua, Wisconsin, and some random Joe Schmuck figured out who the hell I was and stopped to talk to me. I was at work. When I found a job, I was at work, and some random person at work figured out who the fuck I was and came to talk to me, even though they never talked to me before that. And when I say people were trauma voyeurs, people were trauma voyeurs.
Oh, people absolutely are obsessed with that sort of thing. I have a relatable experience. I won't go into the whole details because it's not the same, and there's only the point is once people get their hands on a dramatic story, particularly one that makes news that others are aware of, whatever, they seem to feel like they own your time, that they have the right to confront you about your story. The stuff
And
that you've lived through, and it's freaking wild.
They see you
Not only-
online. Think they know everything about you, right?
oh, yes. And not only that, they think they're owed details about my trauma, my Amish family members, all the things. And I'm like, nah. First off, I'm not telling you my Amish family members' stories without explicit permission.
Yeah.
Second off, it's not my story to tell. Why would I tell you about their lives? That is their life.
Absolutely.
Third off, I don't owe you the mental labor of reliving the most traumatic time of my life, where I was tortured for over a decade in the name of religious freedom. It was allowed to thrive in America. All for some of y'all to sit here and tell me to go back to my country when you realize I speak English as a second language. And you can take that and put it in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah. On the subject of the hats and the attire, the microcontrol, I want to touch on the degree of control, because in a way that makes you hyper visible, because you're constantly subject to scrutiny from the authority figures who are there to tell you how to live. But at the same time, it also creates an obstruction preventing people from seeing you. They see the uniform. They see the attire or what's out of place or what have you. It causes a hyper focus on those specific elements to prevent them from seeing the person.
We just become objects like animals in a zoo.
Well, it makes me think too that in those communities, the clothing control is also about gender control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
obviously, you know.
That's largely true in our society as a whole as well.
Oh my God.
It's not nearly to the same degree. Like nobody's going to shoot you for having mixed fabrics, for example, or the wrong thread pattern. But
Gosh, the
they're
2 fingers
going
of
to get
hair
big
thing.
mad. I mean, hell, there's still people in the general U.S. population who will get mad if a woman wears jeans.
yeah.
That's still a thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That was so pre-2004. I'm good. They can also take that and put it in the shit pile out by my Uncle Joe's barn. Okay? Thank you. All I'm saying is the clothing control, the way that I see that, and I did write about the clothing control a lot in that book, because for me, when I said, if you're going to watch me, I'm going to give you something to talk about. If you're going to put me in this position, well, I got lots to talk about. Hopefully you're ready for what I got to say.
Let's do it.
Oh, we're
Because-
ready. Yes.
Because, like, I'm a push back. Because of clothing control, when you have people so caught up in these arbitrary rules about your clothing, to where they're not even just creating this clothing and doing all of these things, there's 2 things that come to mind. Somebody told me the other day that plain Mennonites are more liberal than Amish people. And Mennonites in general are more liberal than Amish people. And I said, why? Why do people think that? So me and my friends are having a conversation, and Rebecca said, well, actually, plain Mennonites, men often get to have like store-bought clothing so they fit in with dominant culture.
Really?
And Noemi, who was Amish, okay, she said, you know what? The reason Amish women, and she said that, Mennonite women don't talk back. That's why they're more conservative than the Amish. And Noemi said that the Amish women talk back because they're freaking tired of so much sewing.
Yeah.
That's fair, because there's, oh my goodness, there's so much. It just, it boggles my mind anyway.
And it makes me think too, if they are having to spend so much time making sure that everything's just right, it makes me think of like, my early days of kind of being in a fight or flight mode of like making sure I'm matching everything I'm supposed to do so I don't get in trouble. And so if you're spending so much time making sure everything's exactly perfect, having to do all that work, you're not spending time thinking about, is this okay that it's happening this way?
Does this align with the values I actually embrace? Is this something that brings joy to my life? Is this something that brings meaning to my life?
Kind of useful if you don't have time or brain space to think about those things. Useful to the people who want to keep you controlled.
Yeah, you're too busy complying to think about what you want.
And then when you have this whole groupthink mentality, the whole like, and I'm thinking about this from the Army perspective because I was in the Army for a minute. Okay. So when you have like what we call the wall-to-wall counseling, okay, who's doing it? People who are enforcing whatever's happening. I call people who comply with the directive. Like often women are the ones who are enforcing the arbitrary rules, not just on each other, but also on men. So
Yes,
kind of thing.
That is so true. And I was going to bring that up too, Mary. If I remember correctly, 3 of us here have been in the military, correct? You were in the Navy, Ember. Mary,
Yep.
you were in the Army, and I was in the Army as well. Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about your experiences, Mary, because I've seen you online before, but I don't think I've ever heard your military story. I've found that I was more or less either sucked into the Army or attracted to it, because once I got out of the cult and on my own, I had a hard time navigating this world. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing without somebody telling me what to do, telling me what to wear and all that. Like, just do this, do that, and I don't have to think about it. Did you find that was a similar instance for you, that it was like familiar to you? Easy to
Nancy,
do?
I was literally in basic training on my bunk, and I can picture it now. And I was like, oh, this is just like the Amish church.
Yeah, I bet it was.
The structure, the regimentation.
was.
I wonder now,
Whoa.
it's just an idle thought, but because as I mentioned in our group chat as we were preparing for the show, that while I didn't come from a cult background, a lot of the people who went through basic boot camp and even A school with me, they were from very zealous religious extremist groups. So I wonder if the regimentation, the authoritarian nature of it, the some authority figure telling you how to live, if that's one of the reasons that the United States is the way it is, to keep generating more recruits who only really feel like they fit in the military because of the similarities in the structure.
And the military is a soft landing space because we don't have good places for people to go who are cult survivors. When people exit high control religious groups, we do not have a good place for people to go to navigate and transition from one group to the other. We have a lack of adequate access to resources. We have a lack of, like, for us, sometimes people don't even have social security numbers or birth certificates. Sometimes people spend thousands and thousands of dollars trying to get birth certificates and social security numbers, even though they were born in America.
That's another difficulty with visibility, especially in an extreme cult situation like that. There are a few other groups that have notably made the news, some of the separatist compounds where women are forced to give birth without any access to modern medical care, and then the children are never registered with any authority. And once they grow up, what are they supposed to do? According to the state and federal governments, those people don't even exist.
Right.
How do you become visible when you don't even have proof that you were born?
Right.
Wow.
Well,
Yeah.
Mary, I wanted to ask you too, do you feel like in a general sense things are getting better as far as the women and children that are trapped in these Amish communities? So Patty and I just attended Free Flow down in Orlando, Florida, and we got a chance to hear Jasper Hoffman speak of the what is her podcast called?
Plain People's
Podcast.
Thank you. And all the information she had to share was incredible, that she's like worked with the FBI and she's had to infiltrate all of these Amish communities. Is that someone that you're familiar with, or?
Okay, we're not going to talk about that here because I personally know who watches what I do.
Oh, okay.
And I'm very deliberate and intentional about what I say. Okay.
Sounds good.
As far as Jasper Hoffman goes, actually, there's a video on my YouTube of almost exactly a year ago. Jasper Hoffman, Randall Martin, and myself did a talk at the American Atheist Convention in Philadelphia.
Okay.
I've known her for years. I would say the first I heard of her was in 2018 when she ended up launching the Plain People's podcast then.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that people who are in these spaces really could benefit from just going and listening to the Plain People's podcast and being open to receiving that information that is being given there.
Yes.
And as far as what's going on in the communities, I think there's going to be massive church splits eventually.
Ooh, okay.
Because, oh my God, y'all, let me tell you a story. Last fall, there was, because we have communion twice a year, right?
Yep.
There was a new Amish bishop in a certain specific state I will not name. But this Amish bishop decided to outlaw certain fabrics, and that fabric had been allowed for the last 10 years. Certain Amish women and certain Amish men dissented from the vote in church. And he disciplined every single one of them, took the vote anyways, and then passed the ban against that fabric.
Oh,
I
dear.
am telling you, there will be splits within the Amish church that are purely based on how they handle abuse. Because on one hand, I published this book about growing up Amish. I had people who were like, well, I read Amish romance novels, and this is not accurate based on those. First off, why are you comparing my life experiences to a fictional depiction written by somebody who wasn't even fucking Amish in the first place? Second off,
Amish romance novel?
am I salty?
It's a
here?
thing.
Do I sound salty? Yes, I'm a little salty. Okay. Second off, how many people does it take to be convicted of crimes against children for you to believe victims?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently an infinite amount, because the
Because
Catholic
it's not
Church is still a
5.
thing.
It's not 100. It's not 50. It's nothing. Like, it doesn't matter. We can never win.
Right.
And then there's the Amish men who called me and asked me how to buy copies of this book in bulk, to send it out to the ministry in the settlement he lives in, because he feels like the ministry needs to have things shaken up a little bit so they can have their knowledge challenged.
I mean, if he wants to send you money,
what does
why
that
not?
have to do with it? I don't get it.
Send it to Amish ministry.
To what? Pick it apart?
No, so they can learn from this, because they need to know what they're doing. And the way that I write is not favorable to Amish ministry.
So they're trying to make it so they don't produce people like you, huh?
No. That's not a problem at all.
Oh,
That's not a problem. I'm also written about in the Amish abuse awareness meetings. They produce a booklet. I have a copy of a booklet where me and like 11 people that I know went to one of their meetings, and they wrote about us in one of their booklets and how we all experienced abuse. And so we care about these issues. And so now we're here, and they kind of like made us out to be the example.
wow.
Are there Amish communities out there that like hear what's going on in the news, possibly because a lot of this is coming out about abuses within them, saying, "Oh, our community, we'd never do that."
You know how the military has like this gossip line?
Oh, fuck yeah.
I have never seen any place that is better at spreading information than Amish communities.
Really?
Ever in my entire life.
That's all they can do, huh? Yeah.
So is this stuff that's talked about in whispers among kids and women, or is everyone too scared to even
I have literally been listening to the stories of Amish survivors since I was 12 years old.
Oh, okay.
Okay, like within the community then you did.
Yes.
And since okay.
Well,
So they
talk
about it.
Do you two have a similar experience on that front? Like when you realized that the Worldwide Church of God was a cult and you started to try to build your own lives, did you go looking for other survivors, escapees to try to connect relatable experiences?
Not until we often say the church the cult left us. Like it split apart because of doctrinal changes. I'm sorry, Patty, go ahead.
No, you're okay. We were not nearly as insular though. Like we went to public school. And so it was like when the church fell apart, it was like, okay, well, now I don't have to deal with that crap. So it had its impacts. But I think that's maybe an important part of this conversation is that it's so visible, Mary, what you went through. Whereas I feel like maybe closer to the other end of the spectrum in high control environments, what Nancy and I went through was very like it's hard to see it even now. You know what I'm saying? Because it's very much these like small early messages that build the networks of who you are. But it's like it's like taking the worst of what our society kind of was and amplifying those parts. And so it's a different kind of fuck upness, but it's, it's all still the same junk happening to us. You know what I'm
It's the
saying? So like,
lingering trauma.
So,
if that helps us see everybody along that spectrum kind of.
so what I'm hearing from you is that it was kind of like the same ideology, but it was on a different, implemented in different ways, but still familiar tools.
It was a lot of mind
Man.
control, things that really affected us later on in life and left us vulnerable to controlling and toxic, abusive relationships. Absolutely. And evangelicals got their hooks into both of us later on, too.
Oh, my dear God. I cannot stand evangelicals.
They were almost worse. They were
I will say this. I've often said that I feel like conservative Christians in America and Mennonites, like personally, I don't like, one too many Mennonite has approached me and tried to convert me to their church. And I've just had enough of like the evangelical component of conservative Christians. I've had enough of that. But I've often said I feel like I would rather have it be overt rather than covert. Like for us, it's the way that it is. It's almost like when people are willing to open their eyes and see it, it's overt. It's right there most of the time. Unless you have people who are writing research papers and romanticizing the overt control and rewriting what it actually means into something that is minimizing the life experiences of actually Amish people.
Yeah.
But for you, what I'm hearing is that it's more covert than that. And they do it through psychological abuse. They torture you psychologically.
Right. Well, there
You're
were
right
a
about
number
that.
of other things, not necessarily things that happened to myself and Patty personally, but within the organization. There were, I don't know what words I can say on here and what I can't. Let's just say that the cult leader was not a good man. Rumors of young boys in the church, his own daughter, prostitutes all over the world. The man was incredibly wealthy for the times. We're talking it's 70s, 80s. He had 2 private jets, and he met all these famous people because he bribed them. He had a lot of influence, and he destroyed so many lives. We don't even know how many people took their lives to unalive themselves because of this man. It was so subtle, so hidden, and we're trying to expose all those little ways that people latch on the way that he did, and his current followers still are. David C. Peck, the Restored Church of God, Gerald Flurry of Philadelphia Church of God. They're still out there. They still have the same teachings.
I want to dig a little bit into something you said there, that there were so many people who unalived themselves because of these teachings. Do you think that when somebody reaches that point, as someone who's been at that point myself, it's often when you feel like you are unable to live your life for whatever reason, in the context of religious ideas, cults, situations where people tell you who you have to be, it's burying who you are, making
Exactly.
it impossible for people to see you even while you become more visible.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, there were a couple of different factors. If I wanted to get like specific here, one of them was the doctrinal changes. So the church changed from fundamentalism over to more like mainstream evangelicalism. Hey, Jesus loves you and all this bullshit. They steered towards that. More than half the church left at this point. And I heard stories of people, unaliving themselves because they just couldn't handle the fact that they were lied to and tricked for their entire lives. They gave up everything. They gave up all this tithe money. And he had this very harmful divorce and remarriage program where he literally told people, hey, if you got divorced from your spouse, and got remarried, you have to leave that person and try to go back to your original spouse. Otherwise, you're leaving in sin. For a while there, people couldn't even go to doctors in the church too. And I heard all kinds of stories of people losing their life because they didn't get the proper medical care. And so the stories go on and on, but I feel like a lot of them were hidden from society. It was just kind of like people treated this as like this exclusive club, and you have to be in this exclusive club to be a member. It's like, you're a piece of shit, but you're one of God's chosen people. It was sort of a weird dynamic.
They're building
and then
their identity on top of something they aren't. Like they're claiming a piece of this idea that's being given to them on high, and if they own it and ride that wave and bury who they are enough, then they get to be better than everybody else.
Oh, ew. Yeah.
And
That's
was there also a component of prosperity gospel in there? If you comply enough, if you're adequately compliant, everything good in life will come to you that the Lord wants for you, right?
it didn't feel like that.
I think kind of. I think if you were higher up in the church, you had more money. And if you had more money, you were higher up in the church.
Oh dear.
So kind of. But I think it became a place for wealthy businessmen in California to network by the 80s.
Right.
So
They're
I think,
white, wealthy businessmen.
yeah. Well,
We're a
absolutely.
very
Yeah.
racist organization. Yep.
But at the same time, it was maybe the opposite of prosperity gospel in all the rural areas in Midwest for the church, because that's where people were living absolutely dirt poor and not saving anything for kids' college, for retirement, for all of that.
Right.
Because why would they need to? Jesus is coming back. Mr. Armstrong says so. So, I mean, that economic control, is easy to see throughout the spectrum of controlling systems.
Yes, Sheldon, I just wanted to answer you there, hun. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep.
Please note
Rules
how
for me,
prostitutes-
not for thee. Or other way around.
Okay, but how does that work?
Dude.
How does that work though? Like, okay, so when we talk about being visible, people, how many of you are any of you parents?
Mm-hmm.
Patty?
Okay. So when you have kids and you tell your kids, don't do this, and then you model that behavior, what do you kids do? What do your kids do?
They do what you do.
They do
Kids
what you
learn
do.
what they live.
Fucking right, dude.
People do what they live. And so you can pay lip service all you want, and I'm on my high horse this week about lip service. I'm kind of tired of people who do lip service. It gives you vibes, okay?
That's
it's
the
kind of
whole. That's all the denominations of Christianity, all the cults, all the offshoots, all of it. It derived. I'm going to get on my biblical scholar high horse. I'm going to try to avoid that tangent, but it all goes back to Paul saying, "Never mind the law, never mind what Jesus said. Just praise His name, and you're fine." Just obey what I'm telling you and give him lip service, and all your dreams will be fulfilled.
But look, don't you know, he was given the divine inspiration because he was born with an extra appendage. It made him extra super special, holier than thou art.
Wait, who had an extra appendage? And where was it?
your whatever the hell his name was, that was out like sleeping with prostitutes and then having that awful that marriage policy.
Yes, and by the way, we have some viewers that are asking for props. What are we allowed to show on Skeptic Haven?
And somebody asked if this is the inner circle. Have I found the elite crew?
Obviously,
that's right. We keep we keep Mary in the central area and only do special occasions.
I don't know. I might have to dip out now, Ember. That's going a little far. I'm getting really uncomfortable.
Don't want to push the bar here now.
I know. So we're a little bit past the halfway point. So I want to flip the conversation and say, how do we go from being confined, being visible but not seen, to breaking through so that we can both be known for who we are, but also understand ourselves better, to throw away all that garbage that's been given to us throughout the course of our lives and come to realize who we really are. Because as when Forrester famously wrote Only Connect, he was talking about linking one's own mind and heart to become a force for good. Is that internal connection necessary to make connecting with others possible?
Yeah. I'm just going to throw out a very simple answer to kick it off. I'm going to say it starts with the first step. It starts with the first word. We often think we have to do something grandiose to make a difference, but no, it takes all of us making that first initial step, and then we go from there.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah, step by step, absolutely.
To extend what Nancy's saying, I think we are all brought up in a world that teaches us history in a way that makes it like this great white man history where it's like, oh yeah, this guy, he was responsible for this and this and this. So that's clearly how change is made. And you're just, yeah, right. Paul Revere, exactly. And that was largely legend, right? Like, and so I think what it does though, is it wires us up a little bit to think, oh, well, I'm just a regular person. I don't make change. But that's not true. That's not true at all. The only way that real change happens is all of us knowing who we are enough to stand up for what we know to be right and to have conversations that are going to spur other conversations, because that's how we all think the things that we think as a society.
Yeah. And I'm definitely not saying that first word, that first step are easy by any means. I mean, look,
No,
Patty,
of course not.
Patty and I are both in our 40s here, and we are just now talking about this shit. It took forever. We're still questioning ourselves, like, who the fuck would actually listen to what we have to say, right? I think we all have that. But then people have... oh, yeah, go ahead.
That's the nature of growth is you're constantly changing, you're constantly discovering yourself. But I guess the key thing is, how do you start getting out and learning who you are so you can tell other people?
Yes.
Like where I don't know if there's a way to generalize it to a universal experience. Like maybe the best we can do is just look at each individual's experience and hope there's commonalities. But from your perspective, how do you see it as going from being contained in this, glass dome of ideology to start putting cracks in that so you can actually start growing and become yourself?
Yeah.
I'm going to say get curious. And if you don't find yourself to be valid and interesting right now, start getting curious about somebody else, somebody that you think is really cool, somebody not super famous, and just think about their experience. Like Mary could be someone. Think about their experience, read their book, and, get curious about how does experiences like that lead to how they felt at this point? How does it lead to who they are now? And start to have this actual understanding of this is how humans are made. Who you are didn't happen out of nothing. It happened by your place of birth, your DNA, the experiences you've had in your life. And that all added up, inputs and outputs, to make you. And I think you are lovely. And it takes a little bit of trickery sometimes to get past all of your protectors that are going to jump up and be like, no, you're not. You're not special. Because that's what they trained you to do. And so instead, it's taking that time to be like, well, why am I the way I am?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people, they think that they have to have all their ducks in a row in order to even start something. Ducks don't get in a row, folks. They never get in a fucking row. They're always walking.
That'd be boring anyway. Exactly. It's the messy ducks that are fun. And I think there's going to be a little, a different way for everybody to do this. For me, I think the clincher was, I thought, what does my life look like if I watched it like a TV show, spurned by ideas like The Truman Show and other random TV shows that played with this idea. So I was thinking back to my life and trying to watch it from the outside. And I was like, oh, that's why I think the things I think about X topic. Or that's why I really pursued that interest, or why I thought it would be cool if I could do that hobby. And so I started to see myself. And once I saw myself in that way, I was like, oh, she's kind of fun and cool. And I'm sorry for how braggy that sounds. But it's a process. Like, you have to get curious about yourself enough to fall in love. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's true. And this is a thing that I think can happen on the internet. It's a thing that can happen with a therapist. I think it's a thing that we can do for each other. And to me, that's a big thing that I want to make happen, is I want to create the knowledge and the spaces for people to know how to do this for themselves, the various pathways, the various imaginations, the various metaphors that we might all choose from to use to really fall in love with ourselves. Because once we do, we know how powerful that is, and that gets us out here making this change.
Emma, if I may.
I'm done.
Please.
So that's beautiful. You're right. You have to be curious about the world. But I think for many people, the very first part is you have to be stable enough in the world and have access to enough resources to have the luxury of being curious about yourself.
Yep.
And then you also have to kind of believe, some part of you has to believe that you are worthy of feeling loved and connected with people. And you don't get there by continuing to just allow the things that you were taught growing up to roll unchecked like a black and white TV screen in your mind every time you go out to the Walmart and you smell your perpetrator of harm's abuse there and it plays on repeat. You gotta have some kind of safety, some kind of stability. You gotta have access to resources and safe places where you can begin to just allow your nervous system to relax enough for you to believe that you are worthy of living a meaningful life.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That is a supremely important point, because as Patty, as you were saying, you have to be able to expose yourself to other ideas to start to make those internal connections, to start to build everything else. And from that, Mary, what you just said, it reminds me so much of several things within my own experience that I think is the fundamentally, ultimately relatable element, is understanding that a lot of people who have stunted growth for whatever reason have been given to understand that they themselves are not worth fighting for.
Correct. Yes.
What do you think the message was when I was visible, but people said, but she's your mother? And what do you think the message was when the neighbors told me that they suspected or they knew there was abuse, but they didn't know what to do because they were Amish? Mm-hmm. What do you think the message was when the doctor's office did a questionnaire for SAing a child under the age of 10 and did nothing and used my mother as an interpreter? And they did absolutely nothing to help me. So how do we combat those messages? And my friends, I'm here to tell you trauma therapy is a wonderful thing.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a thing. A lot of people feel scared or worried, oh, I don't need a therapist because I'm big and strong, or therapy isn't right for me, or therapy is all quackery, whatever. Everyone needs therapy. Yep. Everyone can benefit from therapy. We're all carrying around giant suitcases of emotional baggage we may not even know are there.
Right.
It helps.
And for many people in America today, they cannot access good qualified trauma therapists because they don't have access to health insurance in an appropriate way.
Yep.
And because people also love, for some reason, I don't know, I just am thinking of a certain person in my life post everything else who was like the only people. This person was schooling me on PTSD and I will tell you, I laughed in their face, but I digress. This person tried to tell me that only people who have been to war have PTSD. Oh, honey child, I am the wrong one. Today is not the day. We're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. When you want to build a meaningful life, the first step comes in being honest about what you experienced. The second thing is realizing and understand that when we were children, we were children.
Yeah.
And we need access to resources so we can manage our lives autonomously. And we can't do that if other people are still telling us what to do, which is where, like, we go to soft landing places. And what do we do there? We realize real quick and in a hurry. I was like, oh, this is not for me long term. I don't know about you, but that was me.
Yeah.
Well, oh, sorry.
I was
isn't
just gonna
this
say
all-
experiences vary?
Yeah.
No, we both don't want to go.
Go ahead.
Isn't it a bit of a call to action then for us if we're in a place where we did have access to the resources and the therapy to like create new systems where we do create safety for people in more places at more times,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
But the knowledge exists now. This is a thing that I believe we can do as people for each other to make it safer to have had bad things happen. Right? Because there's almost this like a bad things happen and then we're not even like it makes us bad because a bad thing happened. So we can't even talk about the bad thing that happened. Right. So if
The shame.
if we right. So I mean if more of us, the more of us that are healed and can create spaces that are healthy, then for it to be okay to not be healed, like that's our call to action, isn't it? Out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, 11 years ago, I made a commitment to myself to live out loud and in color. And now we're here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we do. We have to make commitments to ourselves. We have to decide that we're worthy of making commitments to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't do that if we don't have access to resources, if we're constantly worrying about having enough food on the table or a roof over our head, or about diapers for our children or clothing for our children or access to education. Like, we need access to resources.
Yeah. Would you say that's the first step then, Mary? I was thinking, especially in your situation, the things that you have been through. I mean, I can only imagine. So I assume there's sort of a step, like resources is the first step. It is knowing where maybe these people, having the resources where they can turn to so that they're somewhere physically safe, and then you can focus on the like the emotional aspect of it, right? Being physically safe is probably the first step, right?
Yes.
But we even have to go like further beyond that and make sure that people know, hey, what is being done to you is not okay.
Right.
They don't even know that something is being done to them that is wrong.
Yes.
That's a really good point. There's a lot of building blocks that have to be in place
Like
before you can
of
even start.
Parts.
Yes.
And I don't know if there's necessarily a right protocol for following it.
There isn't a right protocol.
Yeah.
There isn't a right protocol, but ultimately people need housing safety. They need food safety. They need access to education. They need jobs. And before you can get any of that, you have to have an identity. There are certain Amish groups of people, like the ones that I grew up in, where we didn't even have a social security number.
Yeah.
There are certain Amish people, like myself, that were born at home and delivered by our grandmother, the midwife. Some Amish people registered their births in vital records. Other Amish people may not. So it depends on that individual person. But the very first part is establishing an identity. But before they can do that, often they have to have somebody on the outside helping them.
Yeah. Can I respond to Pet Mirror real quick, please?
Sure.
Yeah, I
asking
was
if
actually
the
going to
church
say,
actually does anything good, and I think we can respond. I would like to answer with no. I don't believe that the church does anything good that they couldn't do without the church element of it. There's
Agree.
nothing.
that's
I
an
just,
excellent way to phrase it. Yeah.
I wanna throw this at you.
Yeah.
Okay. The harm that was done to me in the name of the church and that people looked the other way and allowed to thrive. Do you think that the church could have taught me all the good things that y'all love to brag about Amish people, like cooking and cleaning and baking and sewing and gardening? Do you think they could have taught me all of those things without allowing that harm to thrive?
Yep.
Yep.
It's exactly
Not
And
it.
if you don't know, go do some research.
Yep. There is not a single thing. There are good things that happen in relation to church, but not a single thing depends on the church. It could all be
Right.
done in different ways, in better ways, in healthier ways.
Absolutely.
It
Right.
does nothing but hold us back, individually and as a species.
I want to point something out. I had a woman contact me because she saw me talking in this outfit.
Mhm.
And she said, I have never felt represented in media about Amish women until I saw you talking in that dress. And I realized that two things can be true at once. I
Ooh.
can have been born Amish and I can have been queer.
Hell
I
yeah.
have never felt more visible and seen and heard.
Yeah. Well, and there's a switch to the seen and heard piece, I suppose. Although
Yeah.
visible, we've spoken about it in terms of how difficult it was for you, Mary, to be visible in a time when it wasn't a kind visibility. But I think often I hear about visibility and how important it is for, like little Black girls to see themselves in books, in media, and so in those instances, we talk about that visibility being so important. But yours was really personal, and yours was without consent, and that made a difference.
Where do you see representation of queer Amish people?
Oh, you might be it, love.
It's pretty much you. Yeah.
No, there's queer ass poetry. His name is James Swartz. There's LGBTAmish.com. Like, there's more than just me and this woman.
Technically, yes.
Anyways, the point is feeling seen and heard. Like, that's a thing. How do we build that? Like, once people have those resources, they have this identity, they have the employment, they have the education or whatever they need, because we don't even have a high school education necessarily.
All right.
Yeah.
So we need access to resources. We need safety, stability. We need therapy, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying, heavily encourage it. It's just a thought. I'm not telling you what to do. You can take it or leave it. I'm still going to be in your corner rooting for you, even if you don't go, because I do believe in empowerment principles for people, and people are able to control their lives in autonomous ways. They just need to be given the tools to do so.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Hell yeah.
I agree with you entirely. And I find it so interesting, the things that you're saying about, what you're kind of left without when you come out of a community like that. And, if everything's a spectrum, it has me in mind of kids coming out of many high schools in this country right now. And it's like, boop, there you go figure it out. And the resources aren't necessarily there either. And isn't it something to recognize how people thrive when they do have community support that's healthy and they do have resources? And those are ideas that drive me and the thoughts that I think, and what can I say into the world? Stuff about that, and get us talking about it in different ways. So I love so much having gotten to hear a bit more of your story, Mary.
Mhm.
And I just love being able to compare how these systems of control do what they do, and recognize that our path out is going to be deeply personal, but it's going to have a lot of crossover because
I
these
wanted to
systems
add to
controlled us
your
in such similar
saltiness.
ways.
Yeah.
Say what? What'd you
Your
say, Nancy?
saltiness is amazing, Mary. I think people need to feel pissed off and let it be okay that you're pissed off.
Yep.
And people have every right to be angry. So yeah, let it out. Of course, we feel like we've wasted a good substantial portion of our lives. It's okay to be angry. Sometimes that is how we get things done.
Absolutely.
Sometimes it is the most appropriate thing
Mm-hmm.
in response to the things that are unspeakable
Mhm.
and unfathomable.
That touches on an interesting point. There's been a lot of conversation recently about how men are only allowed to feel anger. And on the flip side, women are never allowed to feel anger.
Yeah.
You know what? When I sat in Amish church and I listened to the preacher going on and on and on and waxing and waning poetic about Jezebel's hands and how like she was such a harlot, they threw her from the window and the dogs ate everything of her except her hands. And I thought that I was like a Jezebel and I was going to die from it. That was a child. I think when the preacher preached like that, I'm allowed to say whatever I want to say or whatever tone of voice I want to say. And you know what? They can't take my voice from me.
That's right.
Hell yeah.
Thanks for attending my sermon today.
Thank you.
I know we're getting our Sabbath celebration. It's great. That's a fantastic high note.
You didn't whack the podium.
Oh, we don't have podiums. We don't have podiums.
But
In
feel
fact,
free, everyone watching, feel free to send, tributes, tithes, love offerings, whatever you want to call them. I know we're on Skeptic Haven, which is monetized. We're on the Apostate Sisters, which is monetized. There's another channel. I can't see which one it is, but we're on that. If it's monetized, feel free. If not, maybe consider supporting, say at patreon.com/skeptichaven. Just a suggestion.
I mean, I just feel like if you feel the need to give a holy offering to keep up your place at the pearly gates, I'm just saying, perhaps you might consider that we just love to do the Lord's work here because all your prayers make me gayer.
Hell yeah.
Yay.
All right. On that note, we are starting to move in. We're actually going to do some overtime today. Yay, overtime.
My.
Before we get into, Kat has been saving up audience questions for us, but before we get to that, I want to get all y'all's closing thoughts on visibility versus being seen, the connection versus disconnection, and how you understand to bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go last.
Okay. Well, I can go first then. I'll just keep it short and sweet. Getting back to what I was saying about taking that first step, speaking that first word, whatever you need to do. Now, obviously, Mary's story is on a whole nother level. You have to get yourself in a space where you're safe physically. I know easier said than done, and hopefully we're getting more resources out there. But once you get to that point, if you're in a space where something just does not feel right, I think forget all that bullshit in the Bible. Trust your instincts or whatever you want to call it. Trust yourself. And if something doesn't feel right, if you don't feel like emotionally safe, get the fuck out of there. You are in the wrong spot. You don't want to ever have to pretend to be somebody, even if somebody doesn't agree with you. I think that's okay as long as you're seen. You can disagree with someone as long as they are not stealing your autonomy from you. The point is you want to be heard. You don't want your voice to be shut down, whatever it takes to get there. So get yourself someplace safe. Talk about it if possible. Sorry. Ryan, you have to throw penis in there. Distract.
Damn it, Ryan.
Anyway, you guys know where I'm going with that. Yeah, just take that initial step. Don't let anyone shut you up. If you're in a space where you can get out of and have your voice heard, then do that. And there are people out there that can help you. So.
Yeah. And thank you, Jedi, for the $20 super chat. Appreciate that much. We've gotten a couple on this show, which is fantastic to see. But Jedi is a huge supporter of the community. We appreciate the fuck out of you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jedi. Amazing.
Let's see.
Wonderful. I recognize everyone.
To add on to what Nancy's saying, I guess my thoughts are centering around the idea that that we can absolutely be the change in this situation. You know, we recognize that what people need is to be seen. And if we have found our voice, then it behooves us for a better world to see other people, right? So we can be those safe spaces. We can create those safe spaces. And like this is a all hands on deck kind of situation, right? Like all of, all of the things that we need together we can do, right? Like we can direct people to the resources that are there. We can be someone to listen. And you never know what time you seeing someone and asking them a question about their thing is that moment for them when they were like, oh, maybe I can believe that I'm worth paying attention to, you know?
It never hurts, and sometimes it helps a lot more than we ever realize.
Right. Exactly. And whatever we've gone through, like we now have the ability to reach out a hand to someone else who's gone through that, you know? And I think, yeah, we have responsibility with that, but also things that will enrich us as well, you know, because what's the point of healing ourselves just so we can be like jumping through daisies like, yeah, I'm healed? No, obviously it's so that we can, sorry for the trigger phrase, but stand in the gap for other people and
Hold space.
Hold space. That does sound better, doesn't it? But it's that same idea, except it's really doing those things that we were told those catchphrases for, but it's now actually doing it. That's all I got.
Beautiful, Pat. Sorry, I had to stick the pillow in there. People are asking for flaps.
It's okay.
Okay.
That's okay. I think that you both brought up really, really important parts of like people do need to have resources. People need to have safety. People need to have the space to explore the world and to have new experiences. But I also think that ultimately people need to know that even if they're not speaking publicly, sometimes their opinions should matter to themselves about what they're experiencing today. And if you're in a place where you are unsafe, there are people outside of that group that care about you. They will care about you. They will operate with a mentality of like, this is your life. You know the most about what is the right thing to do for your life. I can't tell you how to navigate assimilation into dominant culture. What I can tell you is there are many of us who will be rooting for you. There are many of us who will be talking about the things that we experience that you might relate to. There are many of us who get together and work to build meaningful connections with others who've experienced similar or even the same type of harm. And the ways that we cope, the ways that we manage the trauma, it matters. Just because it's not going to be the same from person to person to person, just like the trauma isn't exactly the same, but the tools are the same, right? You know, we're going to need to find what works for us to alleviate some of those symptoms of trauma so that we can have a meaningful life and build ourselves a life that means something and is worth something. A life where we are actually worthy enough rather than being born full of sin.
Oh.
And we get to do that together. And we need that connection to do it. People talk about missing community. We can have community outside of church.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
We are allowed to do that. And again, people care. One of the people more than 21 years ago that made the biggest impact on me when I was 19 years old looked at me and said, well, what is it that you can live with? And even in that space where I was still wearing my Amish clothing and going to Amish church and living the good, holy Amish way, somebody saw me as a whole human being, as being capable of making decisions about my life. And if you can do that for other people, just sit back, Stop trying to be the hero, rescuer, savior, etc. Sit back and give them the space to explore their options. And then support them. Be in their corner even when they make decisions that you would not necessarily agree with about where they want to go or what type of therapy they want to pursue or, what type of job they want to apply for. This is not your life. They have to live with the decisions that they make.
Yeah.
And they are capable.
Yay.
Hell yeah.
And thank you.
I don't get the horse.
Yeah, for
Yay.
sure. I would, phrasing it in terms of my own experience, I was the sort of person, partly because of how I was raised, partly because of the culture surrounding me, partly because of my own neurodivergent tendencies. I prioritized other people first, always and in all things, to the point where I even believed my own life didn't matter. It didn't matter how much I suffered, as long as I wasn't accidentally causing suffering to someone else, as long as I was doing something useful to someone else. And if you're anything like me, then my advice to you is to see others, to really look and see the person, and then ask yourself why you shouldn't be seen too.
Why don't you matter?
Yeah.
All right, on that happy note, let's do questions.
Delightful. Ember, can I ask a follow-up question
Sure.
for you? What made you think that you don't matter specifically?
It wasn't one specific thing. It was
Okay.
a lot of things. It would take a long time to summarize
Okay.
it.
You don't have to.
Yeah, it's just my parents, the way I grew up, I was secondary. It was whenever I had a younger brother and an older half sister, and things happen. Also, we grew up on a farm, so there was always lots of work that needed doing. So whenever there was a problem, if you tried to get an adult, it was not now I'm watching TV, or not now I need to sleep for work, or your father's at the bar, or whatever the case may be. That it was a constant signal. You are not important. And that was reinforced everywhere in my life, from institutions at school, like if you have a need, no, you don't, because the teacher is talking. Or if you have a situation, no, you don't, because whatever adult is supposed to be in charge is doing something else. And you aren't actually important. You do not matter. You are an inconvenience on my time. And that got reinforced in social situations, in friend groups, partly I started doing it to myself after a certain point. You want to not tell your friends when you're feeling bad because you feel like you're an inconvenience on them. And it just kept snowballing. I ended up in a marriage based on that idea. And it was horrible. I can't say I regret it because I got my children out of it, and they are wonderful human beings who I completely adore. But it was very not good for me. So it took me a really long time to realize, and in fact, it took this community for me to realize that maybe I could matter too.
Yeah.
You do matter, Ember.
Yeah.
You do.
Ember, you're a legend.
And that what you're talking about entirely too relatable.
Yes. I don't think
entirely.
That won't relate. Yeah. Being
Thank you.
Seen.
Thank you for answering that question.
One does one's best. There are elements of all our story. That's the reason we're all here, right? That's the reason we're visible people on the internet sharing our stories, is so that other people can find those relatable threads and say, holy shit, that's me. I see me in that other person. And in so doing, they can see themselves, because that's what I wished I'd have been able to found years ago.
Yeah.
Ember, for what it's worth, I have you as a friend on Facebook, and I see all the posts that you put on there with your pretty photos, and you make me smile every time I see them.
Aw.
It might be
I'm so
something simple, but it makes a difference.
Mhm.
And Punk Metal Tao, this comment here, yeah, I was guilt tripped into believing everything was my fault. That was very much my experience. Everything was my fault.
Yeah, there's
You
a
know.
lot of relatability in that sort of thing. And that's what we do, is expose the parts, to be vulnerable, to allow ourselves to be seen and not just visible,
Right.
to
Wow.
help other people, because it was the
Or-
help that at one time we needed.
I think one of the biggest things that made me realize how little I thought of myself was really when I understood how it wasn't a problem. What I experienced wasn't the problem. The problem was that I reported it.
Yep.
That was the problem. The problem was that I wasn't silent and I wasn't quiet. That was the problem. And so that, even today, I can have moments where I feel like I'm completely unworthy of even talking. But today, I have way more tools to deal with that than I had 21 years ago.
Yeah.
And I
Oh,
have
yeah.
way more people that I feel connected with, and way more, like, I just have so many more resources and so much more community than I had back then.
Mhm. Well, and Purple makes a good point too. The problem was you questioned authority, and that's true. You know how strong a person has to be to stand up to authority? Like someone has to. It is not an easy thing to do.
Have you ever questioned Amish patriarchal authority?
Fucking
Can't say that I have. Oh.
I've been there. I got the t-shirt. Do not recommend for a good time. But if you're bored, I can help entertain you.
yeah.
I'm sure. My goodness. All right.
What? You're not bored enough, Ember?
I am never bored when you're around, Mary. But we really should answer people's questions before we have
Oh,
to go.
yeah, let's do that. Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. Okay, so Dan D says, do you think ICE will target some of these people? Talking about the communities where there's no birth certificate, no social security number, any of that stuff from earlier.
Oh.
Good question.
You know, Amish people are actually also in Canada and South America.
Interesting.
They might.
Yeah.
In fact, like I've been contacted by people who are having, like, when they see the images of ICE, they've been having like flashbacks of kind of like one of the things that transpires in some Amish communities, where when the church appoints a committee of men that they call a support group, those men will come and take the children. Sometimes they'll even stop people. They'll stop buggies on the road. They'll take the children from them. From the buggies on the road, sometimes they'll take the children from the schools. Some of us were taken from the schools to so-called Amish foster homes. So, I mean, it's already been happening. Just nobody gives a shit about it because, I shouldn't say nobody because people do care. People do care. But typically, people who have positions of authority, they tend to turn a blind eye when it's happening in Amish communities.
Can I
Far too often.
add to that too? Exceptionally Average brought up the fact of like, well, really depends on how much melanin they have.
That's what I was gonna say.
That part.
Yeah, what I remember Jasper Hoffman saying at Free Flow was Amish are not known. Well, I mean, people see them as these simple carpenters and living a simple life from the 1800s. And that's apparently not the case. Apparently, they actually have a lot of power, money, and influence, correct?
No.
So they're not going to deport people like that, correct? They're
Not if they have a lot of power, money, and influence.
yeah.
Right.
So I don't think they're going to. They're going to leave them alone.
Yeah. I mean, my thought was directly that ICE is using the paperwork as their excuse for who they want to go after, not
Right, because they're
Well,
they're
and
they're
let's-
removing visas from people that they don't like.
yeah.
You
Let's
know?
be
So these are legal
exactly.
people, and they're saying, "But we don't like you, so now you're illegal. Bye."
Let's be very clear. People who are Amish tend to be, by and large, of the skin persuasion that is more the mayonnaise variety. Okay? If you happen to have had an indigenous ancestor, there are certain ways that will be looked at. But Amish people themselves, oh, I wrote about it in this book. I'm not going into detail because we'll be sitting here for another 2 hours.
That's fine.
But-
I'm looking forward to reading it. Yeah.
Amish people themselves, you know, they tend to be more of the mayonnaise flavored variety. And if
Yeah.
they happen to be of the less mayonnaise flavored variety, they're going to have less power and privilege within the community. But if the government were to come and try to enact some kind of something, I can almost guarantee you there would be a big holy outroar. We're being persecuted and we have to honor our martyrs.
Mary, I have a question, and this may sound extremely juvenile, but I have never seen an even slightly dark-skinned Amish person. Is that even a thing?
Yes, it is.
Must
A
be
thing.
Amish
There are Amish people. I don't speak for Mennonites. I was never Mennonite. I don't know too much about Mennonites. There are cousins over there. Okay. We're not like them. We're not like that.
superior to them, right?
They not like us.
No, they okay. Somebody asked me one day what my problem is with the Mennonites. Well, when you have assimilated Mennonites who are publishing research that says Amish women cannot speak without the patriarch present, I take issue with that. And when you have these women who are putting out content in academic journals that say, and these are assimilated Mennonite women and men, you have these assimilated Mennonites who are putting out content that says that Amish are not often in the practice of employing abstract or critical thinking or even self-reflection, which is dehumanizing and saying that Amish are all cognitively impaired, and they publish this in an academic journal. I take offense to that. And when you have people who are assimilated Mennonites, who are they have PhDs in social work services, who endorse the booklet I read from in Sins of the Amish called To a Girl of 11, that suggests that an 11-year-old girl should not walk in front of her brother in her night clothes or climb up on a ladder in front of her brother. When you have a social work service, a PhD in social work services, and they endorse that book for preventative teachings, I take offense to that.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
And
then
as
when
you
Amish raised women tell you that they can speak, and you block them and refuse to engage in a conversation with them, I take great offense to that.
Yep.
So I don't speak for Mennonites. I do, however, speak about my Amish life, and I talk about the things I know about Amish life. And ultimately, the black and brown thing is sometimes Amish people do adopt. Now, there are Amish people that are childless. I have an aunt and uncle that are that have remained childless their whole life. Infertility is still a problem in these communities. There are Amish people who have genetic defects. In fact, like, there's a whole database of genetic disorders that are specific to Amish, Old Order Amish, Mennonites, and Hutterites.
Surprising.
It's on the NIMH if you want to go verify it.
Okay.
But the number of black and brown people is very small. But the people who happen to be black and brown, they're always going to be the lowest of the low. And I'm saying that, like, even if they're adopted by a family who gains more prestige or power or whatever because of the fact that they were childless and now they have taken in this poor child from wherever, or, you know, they've adopted this child. People who are not of the mayonnaise flavor are going to have automatically more privilege and power than those who were not that.
We see a
Figured
bit of
as
that
much.
And
in
people who get joined in have less privilege and power. To be born Amish is to be given a sacred covenant. That's what I was taught. And whenever you go out into the world, you take that sacred covenant and you step on it with your feet.
crushed it
Oh.
beneath your heels.
Oh, I feel like might need to go do some crushing.
No.
Did I answer your question adequately?
Hell yeah. Yeah, our cult was very much the same way. Yeah, very racist organization, which they had darker skinned people within it.
Okay.
It was kind of like, oh, you don't marry those people for sure. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know who Robin is sending the super chat. Can we
Hey,
talk about
Robin.
that for a hot minute?
Yep. She's friends
Absolutely.
with Joe Lucky Atheist, and she has her own channel.
Yeah, Robin Webster is a big supporter of the community. She
Yep.
tries to help every way she can. In fact, the Bible that I frequently use when I need to pull up a Bible passage, she sent me that Bible. She
Okay.
does a lot for.
Okay. I think people are often misguided in their attempts to connect. I am so tired of talking about how we make connections with people and people telling me all about the great Amish. They're observing the Amish. I don't need your barracks lawyer expertise on my own culture and my own people. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, I had a feeling that wasn't going to go over super well, but
That's why do people external to a group literally hear me talking about my life experiences of being tortured by that group and respond with some barracks lawyer expertise? What makes them think that their observed perception outweighs my life experiences?
No.
And why should we change the conversation from, what were we talking about? Feeling seen and heard and visible and connectivity and building meaningful lives after trauma versus disconnection. So why should we go talk about whatever that is? Thank you.
it does speak something to the superficiality of connections with people when we only encounter them on like a work basis, for example. Like I often do, one of my many jobs is as a delivery driver, much like Robin. I drive a tractor trailer, and occasionally my stops go to an Amish-owned business of some kind. And I don't know the Amish like you do, but I've been around the communities. I've seen the interactions. I know, for example, that very often the animals are very, very mistreated.
Mhm.
But when I come to a shop and deliver, and they're all smiles and friendliness, it's a
Of
very
course.
surface level interaction. The only time I've gotten a negative reaction as an outsider, as a delivery person who's there to serve them, was when they happened to notice my tattoo. They asked what that was all about, and you know, because they're Amish, I didn't expect they'd seen the Pirates of the Caribbean movie. It says "take what you can," incidentally, which has multiple meanings for me as a person who's suffered in several situations. Take what you can is it's kind of multivariant. Also, I used to be a professional photographer, so that's the way I brought that up to them. Was, oh well, it means a lot of things like endurance and surviving, but also I'm a photographer. I had forgotten how some Amish people feel about photography, and they as soon as I said photographer, they just kind of like I had the plague, and it was kind of amusing actually. But the point of that story is that a lot of these connections are very surface level. You know, I mean, I run into Trumpers, I run into evangelicals who on the surface level of the merest bare daily connection, there's
I mean,
politeness, but that doesn't necessarily reflect who the person is, what they value. And similarly, the women that Robin has encountered, just because they are Amish does not necessarily mean they are bad people. They're still under the heel of the same culture as you were when you were an Amish
they're
person.
still under the authority of the 18 Articles of Confession that were written in Dordrecht, Holland in the 1500s that they used
Oh,
for their
wow.
baptismal instruction. Every single Amish church that I know of follows those 18 articles. And so,
Ooh.
and I just want to point out that, like, Ember and I talking about, like, we've been on a few shows before. Just really quickly. How many shows have we been on, Ember?
Together?
Yeah,
I'm not
together.
sure exactly. We've got to be
been a
getting
few.
close to a dozen, yeah.
It's been a few. But here's the thing. Ember didn't trot out token Amish people to me to change the conversation to be about Amish goods, their perception of Amish, what Ember thinks that Amish really are based on blah, 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 blah. Or like, you know, Amish had really taught you all of these things. Like literally all of the romanticized version of the Amish hasn't been the basis of our connection. So why would Ember and I come here? And why would we invite Patty and Nancy to come have this conversation on a superficial connection? When we're talking about being visible and being seen, how would that logically make any sense?
True.
Ember's wheels are turning.
Yeah.
Say what?
Ember's wheels are turning. She's thinking of something.
Well, I'm trying to devise which is the optimal direction to take that. But I think that's a valid point where it stands, and we really do have to get to the other questions.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Oh my, I'm sorry. I just was like, I want to get this over with.
I got to run for a quick break. I'll be back.
Okay.
Keep going.
Okay.
We've been on
Okay,
this
okay.
one.
What are
Okay.
Amish thoughts on measles spreading?
Ooh,
Okay.
Logan.
It depends on what flavor of Amish you are. There are Amish people that get vaccinated, and there are Amish people like my flavor of Amish people, who I had like. I actually write in my first book about experiencing 5 different childhood diseases because of that, because, you know, they have like specific measles parties to make sure their kids are immune to it so that, you know, they don't grow up and get pregnant and you know, die from having measles and being pregnant, because that's a life-threatening condition.
Okay, so some do and some don't. There's
Correct.
no like
We have Amish have decentralized leadership. You're not going to get the same answer for everything. Like right down to like they have decent, huh?
It's like every other Christian church, right? Everyone makes their own fucking rules anyway.
Well,
right? I mean, there's a base, but then each congregation.
yeah, we have the basis of like the 18 Articles of Confession and the typically like taught like Amish values, but then like the ministry, which is always men. They typically do this in groups, but regardless, there's this process called routinization, and I didn't really understand how to explain some of this until I understood like how the routinization works. But that's essentially it. Amish just have decentralized leadership. They still have the same like, you know, basic rules that they all maybe apply a little differently, but they still apply those rules.
Okay.
They still adhere to those rules. That regardless of how they apply it, like the 18 Articles of Confession are still the same rules that they adhere to.
Okay.
And that even impacts vaccinations and access to medical care.
Okay.
Yeah, vaccinations are well, a lot of medical care. You know, like famously, the Jehovah's Witnesses have waffled on and off about allowing blood transfusions. If there's an area of life that a cult can control, one branch or another is going to try to control it.
Indeed.
Yes.
Because the more control they have over your life, the easier it is to break people.
Well, and okay, so we were all talking earlier, and I'm sorry, we need to get back to questions, Ember, but we were talking about these like Wheels of Power and Control, and there's like an Amish version of one. Is that correct, Mary?
Yes.
Like all the different aspects. I know Patty and I reference the bite model a lot, Dr. Stephen Hassan's bite model. And just all the different aspects of life. But I suppose, yeah, it's literally fucking everything.
Yeah.
I know.
I mean, I just feel like if I'm going to be fucked, let me do it the right way and move on.
Yeah, we all want to be fucked the right way.
Oh my God.
It's so hard to find, though.
Sorry, Ember, I am actually, this is the most chill I ever am in front of the camera. Like, I'm trying not to get you demonetized.
Oh, you can't blame me. It wasn't me.
No, it will always be me, Mary.
I will always be. Anyways.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you have to be yourself. Because A, nobody else can, and B, you can try to be another person. I did for decades. It does not work. It will not bring you happiness or success, and it'll eventually just not work. You reach an end of the road where you just can't. So you may as well just be yourself to begin with.
Well, and really, if you're constantly being a person that you feel you just aren't, you're going to attract the wrong kinds of people into your life, too.
Yeah.
The more real you are, the more real friends and, honest community is going to be surrounding you. There's the flaps for you, Liam. You all are crocheted, so, get some flaps in it.
Yeah, there you go.
I feel like that's appropriate.
That's right.
And there's
it should be normalized, damn it.
Vaginas?
Exactly. Right?
Yeah. Vulvas. Excuse me.
Yeah. Humans are born naked. So yeah, I don't want to hear from these, this is natural, this is not natural, from the frickin' people who think you have to alter your anatomy as a baby to be acceptable in the sight of God. Get out of here. Get out of here.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one.
Ay. All right, we've got one more, and then the super chats. Theo, theoretically, which is a fantastic name, says, question, do you see a chance for the government to protect individuals in excessive fundamentalist communities? And then he later clarified, obviously not this administration, but perhaps in the future.
I was going to say, I see a chance for the government to protect the perpetrators in those communities.
Yeah. Are we ever going to give a shit about the children for real instead of just as a war cry to steal votes or whatever the fuck?
You know what? I was going to sit this one out, but I think I'm going to read the back of my book.
Yes, please.
This book is a story of childhood trauma, desperation, and survival as a born Amish queer, neurodivergent, and AFAB person in America's Amish country, with oppression and silencing from all sides, a collective failure of adults within medical, secular, and Amish communities to provide safety to abused children. How many more children are there like this? And how long are we collectively sitting back and allowing these human rights violations to continue in the land of the brave and the home of the free?
Yeah.
Free. For fuck's sakes.
I mean, the more Marys and the more Jaspers that are out there telling these stories, though, are going to get more free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a piece.
My thought on that is you can't count on the government to protect you, even though that's literally the only reason they exist, the only valid reason.
You know, the only way that the government will do shit is if the people who are in the positions of authority give enough of a shit to do something. That is the only way that you will ever have any semblance of justice.
Which they won't.
And when people in positions of power always seem to care more about power and money, because somehow it's always about money and controlling women and controlling people who are not mayonnaise flavored, then, maybe we should take a step back and look at what our society collectively is doing. And then maybe we should check ourselves on what we can actually do as people, because we are not powerless. Take back your power.
Yes.
Be
We need
visible.
everyone. We need everyone. Mm-hmm.
Be visible and be seen.
Oh, yeah.
All right,
And be
so
curious about others.
oh yes,
Yes.
Question all the
Learn.
things
Yes. Ask
learned.
people questions. You never know what someone's going
I
through.
love you.
My unfinished journey sent a
Learn.
super
Thank
chat for
you.
222 and says, "Hail Nero, Apostate Sisters, Mary, and leaving the cults."
Yeah.
Yay.
That's what's up.
Absolutely.
Fuck. Yeah.
Logan Fisher became a member on one of the many channels we're broadcasting on. So, and enjoy the perks and goodies. There's emojis on every channel that has it. So I assume there's at least that. So, yeah. And as previously mentioned, Left-Handed Jedi sent $20 saying we have your back. Thank you so much, Jedi.
Jedi,
We
thank
love
you.
you. You're amazing.
Yeah. And Robin
Oh.
Webster sent $2 saying I hold milk for the Amish for years.
I don't
And
think that's enough for subjecting me to that, Robin. Next time, try $150. I might think about it.
it is a bit of an ishy subject, but I do assure you,
Oh.
Robin is a really good person and tries to be supportive of the community, even though that definitely turned into a misstep. But that's
Well, she actually is a milk hauler, though.
oh yes, that's
She can be
literally
a
what
milk
she does.
hauler all she wants. The point is we are subjected to this
Mm.
repetitively.
So the goal is
It's derailing the conversation. We're having a conversation about being visible and seen, and we have somebody telling us about the great Amish, the great women, the great Amish women.
Yeah, it's
well, I
it's
think
a
that's why
matter-
we need to keep talking about it, is so that we know the things that are going on. I don't think I had any idea until I heard Jasper Hoffman speak even. Yeah. On what is going on behind the scenes.
Oh, there are so many things going on behind the
They're
scenes.
very eye-opening.
All right, Mary, I live pretty close to Arthur, Illinois, which is like the biggest Amish community in
And let me tell you something about some Amish communities, because there's
Yeah.
one in Illinois. You know how that stereotype is that Amish people don't have electricity? I literally know of Amish communities that have solar panels, indoor plumbing, and they buy cars and pay people to drive them around in the cars, and they pay the insurance for the cars, but they don't own cars.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
I mean, and there
that
is
community is near you.
the weirdness of legalistic cult rules, right? Like, look at how the weird gymnastics that any group like that, but that example, it stands out, right? Of like, oh, look, I'm not breaking the rule because I found this way to do the thing I want anyway. It's like, wow, we just tie ourselves into knots trying to meet these rules wherever we encounter them. What a mess.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a
It's-
mess.
a lot of life is a mess. Self-actualization is a messy process, and the way we've got our society set up does not make it easy. We all do our best, but that is we're well into overtime. That's
sorry.
our show for this time.
Oh my.
Hopefully
sorry.
you all found many useful bits and pieces, things you can reflect on. Thank you all so much for joining us. And a big thank you to our channel members, and especially our patrons, Paul Cammish, Karen Butcher, HellsBells, Logan Fisher, Amanda McLeod, Jamie West, Sydney Davis, Johan, Eric Ozols, Tara S., Rion, D. Murphy, Dan D., Shannon Gray, Michael Wiseman, Bassthrasher, or Bassthrasher, one of those, Bryce, Ronee, Jena, Deborah Grace, Sunny Shell, and Phil Calderone. If you would like to add your name to that list, consider joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/skeptichaven. And if you made it all the way through this show, you must like this kind of thing. So be sure you're subscribed to also catch Let's Talk, Black Freethinkers, The Sunny Spot, Global Atheists, 30 and 60, and of course, more Women Atheists on Loan. Also make sure you're subscribed to the Apostate Sisters, to the Misfit Amish, and me, Ember, at Better Than Ember. And from all of us at Skeptic Haven, may you find safe harbors and sound reasoning. Good night.
And you are enough.
Yes.
You are enough.
I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up.
Yay! Oh, there it goes. Okay.
It always takes a second.
Oh, that was amazing chat. Oh my goodness, I feel so inspired right now. Cat, hello. Yeah.
We are still live. It seems to me.
Are we still?
Hasn't
Well,
turned
that's
off.
awesome. Bye, everybody.
Bye.